Claudia, how did you find carnivore?
Well, actually, it was my son who kind of steered me down that path. You'll hear my story, so you know I've been a lifelong seeker of better health. But he had a roommate, and he's always taken care of himself from the time he was about 16. My son has. And he moved in with somebody who was really into bodybuilding. So my son started lifting heavy and really building muscle. And then one day we were talking, he was telling me that he's eating a lot of protein and a lot of meat. And he also told me that his cholesterol was going up. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, your cholesterol is going up. This can't be good. But he's like, Mom, maybe you should just look into it before you doubt me. And so that's kind of what I did. And so I just went on YouTube and started looking, at all the videos that were available. And of course, you find Dr. Barry. I don't remember if I heard Joe Rogan's interview with Dr. Baker. I can't remember if that was part of it. So, I'm 71, so I'm old. But anyway, it was just that's what happened. I got on YouTube and started looking at all the content creators, and I fell in love with Kelly Hogan right away because who doesn't love Kelly, right? She's just has an amazing energy. And so I watched her, and I like her too because she's kind of a hardliner. She knows what works for her, and she's not going to stray from that path. And that's the kind of person that I am. So Dr. Chafee, of course, is also one of my favorites, but because he originally lived in Santa Barbara, which was just north of Ventura, which is where I'm from. And so I was like, oh, you're from my area. So I bonded with him. I love his hardliner attitude because when I do something, I kind of do it all the way. And that's just my nature. So yeah, so that's how I found it.
Right. So, did you basically jump straight in?
I did. Yeah. And I
Mhm.
had the most success in that first 9 months. Yes, I did. Of course, I've been carnivore now for 3.5 years. So I have never jumped off the meat wagon. I've not had any sugar during that period of time. I've not had any bread. I've not had any fruits or vegetables except avocado in the last 3.5 years.
What made you open to the idea of carnivore in the first place, to even researching it? Were you suffering any health issues?
I was, yeah. Can I kind of start at the beginning and tell you like yeah, it's been, like I said, it's been a lifelong journey. When I was 8, my mom was a single mom and she had 6 kids. She divorced my dad and she had 6 kids that she raised. So I was raised in a pretty uh, impoverished environment, although I had a big family and, surrounded by friends. I lived in a little town and we could walk everywhere. We walked to school, we did all that. But of course, our food was more carbohydrates, beans, right, cornbread, the usual stuff. So I started, and I always had a good appetite. So when I was 16, she met a man, she got remarried, and they thought, since they were working in the big city in Ventura, instead of this little town that we lived in, that they would move us to Ventura. So here I am coming from this little small town with a circle of friends, with 100 people in my class, going to this big town with no friends and like 400 kids in my class. It was just a huge shock for me. So I had to ride the bus for the first time in my life to school. And I would just sit on the bus and feel sorry for myself. My friends aren't here. And so, what is more comforting than food, right? So, by the time I finished my junior year, I have all of these markers of how much I weighed through my entire life. So, obviously, I'm scale fixated. But by the time I finished my junior year, I weighed 175 pounds. And yeah, I remember hiding under, clothes. I'm only 5'3". I might have been 5'4" then, but that was the tallest I ever was. So I was definitely overweight. So I thought for my senior year, when I was 17, I'm going to lose weight. So I did. I went away and I worked for a woman and babysat for her children. And over that summer, I ate 2 hot dogs a day for a month and a half. And that was it. That was my entire. I worked, did a little self exercising, and I went back my senior year. I weighed 150 pounds, and I looked good because I was also doing a little bodybuilding. So that was great. Okay, perfect, good senior pictures. And then After that, after I graduated, I had no desire, zero desire to go to college because I just never liked school. I'm smart and I could do the minimum and get good grades. So that's kind of what I did. And I did that for about 4 years. And when I was 22, I weighed 212 pounds. So as we can see, my scale, my weight is going up with every new situation that I'm in. I moved out of the house when I was 22 with a little encouragement from the family because, hey, you're 22 and you're still living at home. In those days, that's what happens. Nowadays, not so unusual, right? In those days, kind of unusual. So I had a job. I had my own apartment. Nobody was watching me, what I ate. Nobody was watching what I ate. So I probably put on another 30, 40 pounds in the next couple of years. And then when I was 24, my brother moved to Italy for a year and his wife, they had 2 kids. And so he came to me and said, hey, do you want to go to Italy with us? And you can be a nanny for the kids. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like an adventure. Mind you, I'd never been anywhere. I'm born and raised in Southern California, except for when I was like 3, I lived in Texas or something. But so I'd never been anywhere. And so it was a huge jump for me. So I went to Italy and we lived in this really cute town in northern Italy on the coast called Alassio. And I was a nanny for the next year. And my brother and his wife took trips and I would watch the kids and keep them in school. But the one thing that I did do was I walked. I started walking there because it was a tourist town and we got there in September and everything closed down. So there's no more beach, happenings. It's cold weather. But I did develop a sort of a walking habit there and I lost 40 pounds over the year that I lived there. The other thing that happened was after a few months, I met my husband and with the help of my brother and my parents who had to go to the Italian consulate and do all the paperwork. It's not easy to import people like people think it is. They did a lot of work on our behalf. And I got married after about 6 months and we brought him back to the States. So then I came home and and then we had an interesting marriage. You don't quite realize that there are big cultural differences between somebody who lives in a Southern California city like Ventura, where there is no mass transit and you can't just walk anywhere you want to. And we drive a lot in Southern California and he didn't drive because he was raised in a European country where they have buses and trains that take you everywhere. You don't have to drive. So it was pretty clear that it was not a perfect match. But hey, all of my friends had gotten married out of high school and it was like, it's just something you do, right? I'm 25 and I'm not married. It was just terrible. So anyway, there were a few good years in there, but I'm not a quitter. I wasn't, going to give up on the marriage because of all the work that my parents had put in and my brother had put in. And it was like, I'm just, I'm not a quitter. So I stayed in that marriage. And when I was in my early 30s, I weighed 315 pounds. Yeah. So obviously I was pretty unhappy and I'm sure he wasn't any happier, especially with a wife that weighed 315 pounds, but I was really unhappy. So what I did, because I always like to do something, I'm not somebody who's just going to sit around. I always have to try to fix things, so I've been trying to fix myself for a long time. I met a woman who was a hypnotherapist and I thought, well, maybe if I have hypnotherapy, that will help me. So I remember having some sessions with her and I remember what she told me was that when you eat food, because she just assumed I was eating large quantities. I really just was eating the wrong things. Not so much even, I was never like a volume eater. I would cram donuts in my mouth or anything like that. That wasn't my problem, was just the foods that I was choosing. I was a salty chips kind of girl and maybe some beer. So anyway, what she put in when she did her hypnotherapy with me was that you will eat less. So instead of having a hamburger and French fries, you will just have the hamburger. So I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. And somehow it worked because by the time I was 35, I was down to 250 pounds. So the hypnotherapy obviously did something. Well, then I found out I was pregnant. After 10 years of marriage, I got pregnant, which was the best thing, of course, that ever happened to me. But So when I got pregnant, I was 250 pounds. When I delivered, I was 270 pounds. And I did have a lot of problems with, water and stuff, water retention and whatever they call that, I forget. After I had the baby, I went down to like 230 or 40. So I had like a big weight loss, like boom. So that was pretty cool. And then, just life happened. I was a single mom for many years, working full time, of course. I had to hand my son over to somebody actually that I knew very well, who was his daycare, and she became his second mom. Um, but it's in those days we didn't have weeks and weeks off to bond with our kid, but it didn't matter. I had a really good daycare person. So one day my son came to me and said, "Mom, when are you going to get me a stepdad?" And I thought, oh gosh, my son wants a stepdad. So I guess I better try to do something, because I had no time for men. I had no time for dating. I would go out with my friends and we would have too much to drink and we would dance and stuff, but I just had no time for any of that stuff. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try some dating. So I did do that. I went online, internet dated, and met a lot of really nice people from all over. And had a guy fly out from England that I had a few dates with, and a guy come down from Canada I had a few dates with, and a guy come from North Carolina that I had a few dates with. But it wasn't anything that, nothing ever turned out. So then my son was a little older, and it was like, my mom brought my stepdad into my life when I was 16, and it really turned my world upside down. Not that, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, because we had a really good relationship later on when I wasn't a bratty teenager. So I thought, I'm just not going to do that to him. So I just kicked the dating out. I don't need to date. He's fine. I'm fine. We're all good. But I did start going to the gym around that time. And so I've been in the gym, in and out of the gym off and on from my mid 30s all the way to now. I still go to the gym. So, and I was looking pretty good. I remember I got down to 175, probably when I was internet dating. Not exactly. I don't remember exactly. But yeah. And then life just happens and you get busy and you're working full time and you're just surviving, so many years. And sometime in 2011, I adopted a dog. And I swear she was an angel sent to me, because she's the one who got me really walking. Because you have a dog, you got to walk the dog, right? And I'm, an anal dog owner, just like I was a controlling anal parent. But so I had to get out and walk. And so I started walking my dog. And that was like the real big change in my life. You just don't realize how much even just like simple walking can like change your attitude, make you feel better. You're getting out. And so, yeah, I had Stella from 2011, and I had to put her down because she got lymphoma, like so many dogs do, because you don't know what you're supposed to be feeding him. And she was getting crap kibble, good kibble, not crap kibble, good kibble, but still kibble. So, yeah. But she lived for about 12 years, and she was my savior and my constant companion. It's like, who needs a man to have a dog? That kind of thing. So sometime around 2017, not around 2017, 2015, my younger brother, who was, I believe, only 58 years old. I haven't done the math, so I don't remember, but he died of colon cancer. And yeah, that was a really hard time for me. I'm not somebody who normally gets depressed. If I do, I just pick myself up by my bootstraps, because that's what we do. My grandmother was from England, and she was a pretty hardcore English woman. And yeah, that's just what we do. We just pick ourselves up and go on. But I did have to go on disability for about 6 months, because I was just like not myself. I could not focus. I worked in customer service most of my life, which is why too I talk a lot. But I was an office manager, and then I worked in customer service, helping people that had problems all day. And so I just couldn't do that. I just was like, so I took 6 months off, and I don't know. Well, how old am I now? 71. I was in my 60s, mid 60s. And so when I was ready to go back to work, I couldn't find a job because I was in my 60s, and nobody wants to hire you at that age. They don't care what your experience is. It's like you don't have maybe the computer skills that they're looking for because you're older. You have the people skills and the customer service skills, which to me were way more valuable because I don't think a lot of people nowadays know how to talk to people on the phone. They, you know what I mean? They don't relate to people. They don't know how to say.
They don't know how to talk to people, full stop.
Yeah. And especially like if somebody calls in a problem, you just need to listen. Most of the time, they just want you to listen to their complaint. They don't want you to jump in and say, but this, but that, but this, but that. It's about being a good listener. In 2017, I finally found work, and it was the last job that I had, and it was the best job that I had. And I'm going to mention this to you because 2017, I follow numerology and astrology. I'm a spiritual person, not religious. So my beliefs are, pretty universal, big out there. But anyway, in 2017 was a 1 year, and 1 year is all about new beginnings and good things. And for a lot of people, obviously not everybody. But this next year, 2026, is also a 1 year because 2 and 2 and 6 is 10, and that's a 1 year. So I just want everybody to know that there's a lot of good things coming. 1 year is a great year for new beginnings. So like Courtney Luna is taking her family, and they're going to get into their van, and they're just taking off. They're leaving their whole life behind and taking off. That's the kind of thing that a 1 year is going to bring, and it's going to support that kind of energy. So I'm thinking that this is going to be really good for her, is what I think. So anyway, in 2017, I found the best job that I ever had with the most generous boss. He was so good to his employees. There were bonuses every year. There were dinners he would take us to. Our Christmas party was fabulous. He would bring the limousines, and we would be taken off to a great restaurant. Yeah, and it was really amazing. And while I was working there, again, I don't remember the exact dates because two things happened at the same time. Somewhere between 2017 and 2019, I was reading my book one day, and I looked down and I noticed that the lines were kind of broken. And I had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which I thought I was controlling pretty well. So when I first started taking diabetes, when I was first taking medication for diabetes, I was taking metformin, and I was taking 500 milligrams for metformin a day. And that's when I was starting my lower carb journey. I would eat what I thought was a low carb diet. I would have broccoli and cauliflower for lunch, and but I would put like a queso, which is like a cheese with salsa on top of it. It's like, ooh, it's super healthy. I was told popcorn wasn't that bad for you, so popcorn was allowed for sure, because that was one of my addictions, that salty popcorn. So I was eating okay, but it wasn't, I was eating what I called a lower carb diet. It wasn't eating a lot of sugar, bread, potatoes, any of that kind of stuff. So somewhere in there, I noticed these little cracks in my vision. So I went to my optometrist, and he looked at my eyes, and he goes, you should probably go see an ophthalmologist because there's definitely something going on. So I went to see the ophthalmologist, and he said, yeah, you have diabetic retinopathy. And I said, well, what's that caused from? And he's like, well, your blood sugar's too high. And I'm like, well, how could my blood sugar be too high? Because it's not. I check it all the time. I had an A1C of like 5.7. I'm taking my medication. I'm doing everything right. And he's like, well, yeah, but you probably had it before you started taking medication and you didn't know it. So what ended up happening while I was working at this fabulous job is that I had to have eye injections and for my retinopathy. And I don't know if you've ever had a shot in your eye, but it's pretty dang creepy. Not so painful, but I do remember I jumped one time when he gave it to me, and the doctor yelled at me, stop jumping. I'm like, well, you have somebody come at your eyeball with a needle and see how you don't jump, So I think I ended up during that period of time having like 3 eye injections for retinopathy. And so obviously I wasn't doing something right with my diet, but I tightened it up more because I did get down to where I was only having to take one metformin, 500 milligrams a day. So that was good. It was improving. But I don't think what a lot of people understand is that even though you're controlling your sugar levels, you're not controlling your inflammation as long as you still have diabetes. The inflammation still exists in your body. It may not exist to the level of where you're going to get retinopathy or have to have your leg cut off, but your body is still inflamed. And it makes me sad when I know people who are type 2 diabetic. And I've actually had people reach out to me when I brag on Facebook, how did you, get rid of your diabetes? And as soon as you mention the diet and the way you do it, they're like, oh no, I could never do that. No, I could never do that. And they're going to be okay because they probably won't ever have their leg cut off, but they might have a heart attack or they might have something else that's related to that disease. So I was, I just thought everything was under control. I wasn't happy, but it was better and it was good and my numbers were good. So it's like, it's all good. And then in 2019, May of 2019, I started having weird symptoms. Like I bent over the sink one day. I was home at lunch and I bent over the sink and my eyeballs crossed. And of course, as soon as I put my head up like that, they went back into place. And I'm like, okay, well, that can't be right. I've never had my eyeballs crossed before. So I went back to work and told them what happened. And they go, call your doctor. So I called my doctor and made an appointment to go in. And it happened to be a different nurse practitioner than the one I normally see. So she was like, well, have you ever had that happen before? I'm like, no. She goes, well, if it happens again, you might want to come back and see your nurse practitioner. I'm like, okay, great. Thank you. So you think that's perfectly normal? Well, they're busy. They have all these people to see and places, people to go. I don't know. But anyway, so I went home and I'm like, okay, this is really weird. And then I started developing a headache in the back of my head right here. And Dave, I do not get headaches. I am so fortunate that is not one thing that I have ever suffered with is headaches. So when you get something that you don't normally get, you're like, okay, something's going on. This isn't right. And then I started having a few dizzy spells. And I had vertigo probably one time, maybe 20 years before. So I thought, wow, maybe it's vertigo. So I went back to my nurse practitioner and I told her I'm getting these headaches. And I never get headaches. This is not normal. But, there's only so much they can do. And she wanted to order a CT scan for me. She could not get approval from the insurance company for the CT scan because, well, she could just be having headaches. You need to treat her with the headache protocol first before she can have this CT scan. And I'm like, why am I going to do that? I don't get headaches. This is unusual. You know me. Why are they making the decisions about what's going on with my health? They're making the decisions, not me. So it did not get any better. She was fighting for me, to no avail, and it just wasn't getting any better. And so I developed also a pain in my upper palate, like brain freeze. It felt like brain freeze. And I'm like, oh God, this is really getting crazy. And this was in May. So I went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and he checked out my ears and everything. And he's like, I don't see anything. I went to a dentist because I was having pain in my roof of my mouth, and he said, Claudia, I don't see anything. I think there's something else going on with you. So I'm doing all these things, trying to find some sort of relief. And then I finally had a CT scan. Don't ask me when it was, because this is a very traumatic time for me, because I knew there was something going on with me and nobody was listening to me. It was so frustrating. So I had a CT scan. And from the CT scan, they said, well, that doctor recommended that I have a CT scan with contrast, because the first one was without contrast. And they're like, well, why aren't you? My nurse practitioner was like, you should just go for an MRI. Well, good luck getting an MRI approved, let alone an MRI with contrast. So I had a CT scan with contrast. Another month went by and I had an MRI with no contrast. So now we're like in July, and end of July, maybe the beginning of August, and this is 2019. Why do you always remember the year you had a stroke, right? Can't remember a lot of things at 71, but I always remember that. So anyway, it was a two months of frustration, and I didn't know what else to do. I needed the MRI with contrast. My doctor told me I needed it. She couldn't get it approved, or my nurse practitioner. And so finally, in frustration, I went on Twitter, which was Twitter. It's X now, but it was Twitter. And I reached out to the insurance company. I went to their page on Twitter And I just made this huge post. I need help. I have been having this symptom and that symptom for 2 months. I can't get the tests to prove that I need it. Something's happening. Something's going on. This is not right. My brain isn't right or something. I need help. And by George, they reached out to me. Somebody from their customer service reached out to me via Twitter and said, okay, tell me your situation. What's going on? And I told her. And then I found out that the people actually approving the tests, the insurance companies, send that stuff out to an independent company, which I did not know. They send it out to an independent company who makes you jump through all the hoops, trying to save the insurance company money, I guess, by not approving tests. And then you can't say, well, my insurance company didn't approve it. It's like, no, this independent body didn't approve it. And I had no idea that they did that. I was told then that they did that. I had no idea before that. So anyway, with the help of the Twitter person, customer service person, she finally got the MRI with contrast that I needed. Everybody knew something was going on, but God forbid they should give me the test that I need, because that's going to cost them money. So after 2 months, I had the MRI with contrast. And in the middle of August, and this all started in May, in the middle of August, I was at work one day on a Friday at this fabulous job that I had. And I loved it because I had no responsibility. For the first time in my life, I just, did a little of this, I did a little filing, and I was not like the main manager trying to deal with angry customers. So it was still the best job that I ever had. So anyway, I'm at work one day and I get a call and it's like, Claudia, your doctor's office is on the line. And I'm like, uh-oh, that can't be good. And I'm like, hello. And she goes, hey, Claudia, this is blah, blah, blah. And I sent your MRI with contrast to a neurologist that I know. You have an appointment with him in September, which I did for this neurologist, because it always takes a couple of months to see a specialist. She goes, but he read your report and he says you need to go to the hospital. And I'm like, right now? I'm at work. And she's like, yeah, he said you should go now. So I just turned to my boss and I'm like, hey, boss, doctor's office called, said I need to go to the ER. And they're like, okay, yeah, go. Because they had seen me at work. I was having dizzy spells where I would get dizzy looking at my computer. And they knew when I leaned back and put my fingers here on my third eye, trying to get the blood back to settle down, they're like, Claudia, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. So they had been watching me go through this for a couple of months. So anyway, I went to the ER and they did tests and another MRI with contrast. And the doctor came out and said, well, you've had a stroke. And I'm like, what? Because I knew there were particular times where I felt really bad in the head. And what I would do is I would just go to bed. I would just go lay down, because as soon as I lay down, the blood is going where it's supposed to go. And I felt better. So I kind of figured out that it was when I was dog sitting for a friend of mine, because I remember bending over to pet my dog goodnight and feeling this real bad head rush. And so I just went to bed. And who knows what could have happened to me, right? I swear, people watching, spirits watching over me. But anyway, so he said, you've had a stroke. And he said, you need to have an angiogram. So they can go in and they're going to go through the leg and into the brain for this angiogram. And you can do one of two things. You can either go home and come back on Monday for the test, or Monday or Tuesday, as soon as we can work it in. Or he said, you can stay the weekend and you can have your MRI on Monday morning. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. I said, do you know how long it's taken me to get to this point, to have somebody who's actually listening to me and finding out what's wrong with me? This has been going on for 2.5 months. I said, I'm not going anywhere. So he goes, okay, that's fine with me. So I ended up staying in the hospital in Ventura, and I had a super nice weekend. People were waiting on me all weekend, and they pumped my bed up so I could see I had an ocean view. They raised my bed, and I was staring at the ocean for 2 days. And on Monday morning, I had the angiogram, which was an experience in itself, because you can feel that thing going in your body when they shoot the dye into your head. It was like creepy, but I made them give me lots of medication. And what they do the angiogram for is just like when they do a heart angiogram. They tell you before, if we need to, we may need to put a stent in there to open up the vein. And the stent, putting the stent alone could cause you to have another stroke because you got to sign your life away before you do this stuff. So anyway, I said, no, let's do it. So they did it. And fortunately for me, when it was all over, he said, you don't need to have a stent. The blockage isn't that severe. And so like, I'm great, super happy. And now I know what's wrong with me. So he said, okay, take these blood thinners, Plavix. I was put on Plavix, which is an anticoagulant, I guess, technically somehow. And we're going to put you on a statin, and we are going to give you blood thinners. And hopefully you should be okay. In a couple years, it should be like everybody else. So that's what they did. He said, I want your cholesterol, your LDL cholesterol, to be 70 or less. So, I did that, right? I'm all over that. It's like, okay, yeah, let's do it. So he put me on a statin, and I don't think I changed my diet all that much because I was eating kind of a low carb diet then anyway. And by George, I got my LDL down to 70, and I was, taking the statins. And yeah, I did that for a couple of years. And then in March of 2023, I thought, well, I've lived my entire first part of my life in Ventura County in Southern California. And so now there's really not anything, I have family there, but not all my family is there. Half of my family lived in Northern California, and that's where my brother was when he passed away. So I thought, I don't really know his side of the family that well because we would only see each other once or twice a year. And I really felt like I wanted to be there he has 5 grandbabies. They're not babies anymore, but he has 5 grandchildren. And I thought I really want to be there to try to step up, on his behalf. And I was just ready. There was like, I retired from my job at the end of 22. I just knew it was time to go because I was getting a little cranky and having to go to work. And I thought, well, this is not good. Your attitude is, changing. Obviously, you need to change. So I retired at the end of 22. My dog passed away at the beginning of 2023. So in March of 2023, I made a trip up north to Redding, California. And I just thought, I have to go see it because I'm about how it feels. I said, I have to go see it. I have to go put myself up there and feel what it feels like because I had never lived anywhere else except for that year in Italy. I'd always lived in Southern California and not very well traveled. And so anyway, I came up to Redding. I stayed 10 days and I really, I liked it. I said, yeah, it does feel good. I mean, we're not very far from Mount Shasta. It was a huge spiritual place in Northern California. And I thought, gosh, that's, it felt fine. So luckily for me, when I was up here, I found this mobile home that I bought, and it sits right on the Sacramento River. So if I were to turn this thing around, you would see that my deck and the Sacramento River. So I thought, well, if I'm going to leave the beach, I'm going to live by a body of water, by gosh. And so I put an offer in on the mobile home, went back home to Ventura and told my son, yeah, I'm going to make the move. And he goes, well, I want to go because he has always liked winter sports like snowboarding. He target practices and that's what brought my brother to Northern California originally because he was a hunter and he did all those outdoor things. And my whole family they're all campers and they're all really hardcore outdoors people, hardy people, very hardy. So yeah, we, fortunately for me, my son is a great packer. So we put all of our belongings and then we moved to Northern California in May of 2023. So I think that was, we had started talking about the whole protein and I started watching the videos. Oh no, I messed that up because it was in 2022, June of 2022, when he was living with his friend and he pointed me towards those videos. And I watched, Dr. Barry a lot, Dr. Chafee, Kelly Hogan. In 2022, June of 2022, I started my carnivore journey. So that's when I became a carnivore, I was still living down south in Ventura. And I had a lot of success right in the beginning. I got rid of my type 2 diabetes in 3 months. I got myself off of the statin because, of course, by then I knew people were saying statins were crap. And I did have some unexplained leg pain. And really, that's all you have to do when doctors try to get you to take a statin because now my cholesterol is a little bit high. You just say, no, I had too many side effects. and especially leg pain. And so I just can't take that. Sorry, doctor, I can't take that. And it's like, okay. So yeah, I started in June of 2022 is when I became a carnivore, and I had a lot of success right away. I was probably 100 and, well, I had been watching my weight. I was probably 165 pounds when I started carnivore. So that was pretty good because my weight went like this and peaked in my 30s and then started going and until it came down. So I was 165 when I started carnivore. And we moved to Northern California, so I completely changed my life. I mean, completely. And I started being more active. I'm not a big hiker. I don't like bugs very much. And so, yeah. But I did other things with the health insurance, kind of health insurance I have here. They pay for gym memberships. So right now I actually have 3 different gym memberships. So I go to classes and stuff. But it was I started at 165, and I can't honestly remember when I got up here. I had lost at least, I don't know, 20, 30 pounds or something in like the first, excuse me, in like the first year. So but still, my goal weight has always been, well, it was 130. Now it's 125. And right now I'm 134. So from the time I started carnivore, and I'm only 5'3" now, because if I was 5'4", I shrunk. But I guess, you get old and things start to settle in. And so yeah, I this last year I had 2 surgeries. The only surgery I had ever had prior to last year was a hysterectomy, a C-section. When I had my son, I had to have a C-section. So I always had that apron belly. All my, my fat was this unsightly, and I still have a little belly. But so last year I had to have a hysterectomy because I had what's called a uterine prolapse. Things start to fall out sometimes. And so I had that done in November. So that put a little bit of a cramp on my exercising because I was going to a UJAM class and a Zumba class and yoga class. And I do all of my classes in the morning. So I intermittent fast. Some people say, oh, women have to have breakfast. I've had several influencers. You have to eat breakfast. You have to eat breakfast. And it's like, I'm not going to eat breakfast because I do all of my exercising in the morning, and I'm doing that fasted. So I intermittent fast till about 12 o'clock. I have my big meal in the middle of the day, just like the Italians do. And then I have a light dinner. So, that's how I do things. So anyway, at the end of last year, after I had my hysterectomy and I couldn't go to all my classes, and somebody gave me some delicious peanuts. I was eating peanuts, which is not good because salty snacks are my addiction. And it was the holidays, so, that was my cheat. And so I put on probably 10 pounds, but now from January to this time, I'm like I said, 134. So I've taken all that weight off. And this year, I'm not eating nuts at the holidays because that's just a curse for me.
And how are your eyes now?
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I went to have a new glasses prescription this year. After every 2 years, the insurance pays for new glasses and stuff. So I went to have an eye exam, and I had seen the ophthalmologist. I'd seen the ophthalmologist last year, and he told me that he saw no signs of diabetic retinopathy, and he could not tell that I'd ever even had the disease. So there you go. Yeah, so that was pretty good. So that was a really good report. He said I did have a little bit of a cataract starting in this left eye, and no doubt, because that's where all the trauma was. That's where I had the shots, was in my left eye. But I had another exam this year, and that's not changing. So it's like, okay. But I would notice that when I was putting my glasses on to watch television, or, I wasn't really wearing my contacts much then, that I could see better if I held my glasses away from my eyes a little bit. And so this year, when I went to the optometrist to get a new prescription, I was panicking. I thought my eyes were getting worse, but my eyes actually got better. So my vision from 2 years ago actually improved. So that's why I couldn't see out of my glasses or my contacts, because they were too strong. So yeah, I have better eyes, and there's no diabetic retinopathy or anything like that in there. What I do have is a lot of floaters in this eye. And my ophthalmologist told me, unfortunately, what they used to use, 5 or 6 years ago to numb your eye was leaving debris behind in the eye. So, in fact, what I probably have in there is some debris from these eye injection numbing shots, and that it probably never would go away. So it's like, well, that's frustrating. That part is frustrating. But in fact, my eye health is better and my eyesight has improved. Yeah. So
That's
that's a big
fantastic.
victory. And yeah, I was really happy about that. I was not happy to find out that I could not get rid of my floaters, most likely. Although I have floaters in my right eye, I never had shots in my right eye, and those have not seemed to resolve themselves. But all the usual things, you know, um, like no stinky feet, no stinky breath, just a lot of the other small things that people talk about. I've had a lot of those small victories also. But for me, because like I said, my weight loss journey, as you can tell, has been a lifetime. Getting this close to where I now want to be is amazing. And I'm in great shape. I mean, great shape. I shouldn't have said that. I'm in good shape. I'm strong. I mean, I can do things that I'm not supposed to do any heavy lifting because I had a second prolapse surgery. Who knew other things could fall out? But I had a second one in June of this year. I had to back off on my exercise. But this time, I was able to just maintain my weight loss. I didn't have any weight gain, even though I didn't change the way I eat it, and I wasn't working out, and I wasn't walking, none of that. So, yeah, I was super happy about that because that means
Right.
that whatever I did have was just, yeah, keeping me under control. So that was kind of amazing. But I've been back, for all my classes now for a couple of months, and I've started adding, new things. Like I cannot do what they tell you to do in most of the carnivore community: lift heavy things and sprint. Well, I can't lift heavy things anymore because I don't want any more body parts to fall out. So I have like a weight limit, like 20 pounds or something, which I don't listen to if I'm just going to move a plant or something on my deck, but not to do it on a regular basis. I'm not going to tempt fate. Like I had a rebounder that I used to jump on, and I'm thinking, gosh, you just jumped your organs right out of your body. So I got rid of the rebounder. I don't lift heavy things. I do lift small hand weights. I do a lot of machines at the gym. I just started doing the elliptical again because that's really good for your leg strength. And I don't sprint anymore. I was doing that Japanese walking where you walk slow for a minute and then you walk as fast as you can for a minute. Have you heard of that? And then you walk slow for a minute, then you walk as fast as you can for a minute interval. And I really like that, but I don't feel comfortable, doing that pound, 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 pound when you're fast walking anymore. So you do what you can, you know.
Yeah.
And in Zoom, we jump
Mm.
around a lot, and I don't do jumping jacks because I don't want to do the jumping thing, but I do everything else I can do, and I feel like I can feel myself getting stronger. So even if, like, I just encourage people, if all you can do is sit in a chair, we had somebody come to Zuma and she just sat in her chair and did all of the arm movements because she wasn't, ambulatory or whatever, and just do what you can do. If you can't lift heavy things, then do something else. If you can't sprint, then walk. I mean, just movement has been a big part of my life, like for a long time, but more so at other times. But I just think it's so important.
So, you mentioned how many times you're eating in a day, but what are those meals actually made up of?
Well, it does vary a little bit. I do eat hamburger meat. I do eat that a lot, but my main beef would be tri-tip. I really like tri-tip. Now it's getting to be kind of expensive. So, but I just happened to find it on sale for $3.99 a pound the other day, which is a really good price. And so I bought like 20 pounds of it. So I'll have it for a while. But I do eat a lot of tri-tip ground beef and pork. I like pork chops. I don't know how good pork is for me because I know it's not the grass fed kind or whatever, but I do like pork. And eggs, I'm on and off of eggs, just depending on who I've listened to and what their opinion is. I don't eat liver. Sorry, people, but I ate liver as a child. I was forced to eat liver as a child, and I am not going to force myself as an adult to eat that disgusting meat. So I will make some chicken gizzards and hearts in my crock pot, a couple of times a month, and then I don't like sardines, but I do like anchovies. So anchovies are my fish of choice if I'm gonna, and I will eat them like after a meal. They're super salty, so I really like that. I've tried the sardine thing and I can't do it. I did one time do a 3-day egg fast and I lost 3 pounds, so that was interesting information for anybody else out there. I'll probably never do that again, but I like meat too much. So yeah, I would say probably pork chops, some kind of hamburger, and tri-tip. And that's mainly what I eat. And then at night, I'll keep it kind of light. I might have some shrimp. Um, I might have a couple of eggs. I might just have some coffee with heavy cream in it. Because surprisingly, if you only have fat for dinner, you can lose weight. So it's kind of like doing a fat fast if you don't eat for that whole 17-hour period, right? So you just experiment with what works for you. And I know what does work for me and what doesn't work for me. And like, I can't eat dinner like people eat dinner. And like, it made sense because Dr. Baker says protein takes a long time to digest. And if I eat a lot of protein at lunchtime, my body is still working, digesting that for hours. And if I add, because I intermittent fast, and so I eat lunch between 12 and 1, and then I'll have my last meal like between 4:30 and 5, whatever I'm going to eat. And so if I pack on more protein after that protein that I had for lunch, this is going to take, my blood sugar is going to be higher in the morning. It's just going to take a long time. But if I may have a lighter dinner and add fat to it, so if I'm having shrimp with butter, that kind of thing, even though the shrimp does have protein, the butter offsets a lot of that protein, spike. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. And the only cheat that I do is right now, and I'm going to get rid of it January 1. Coffee's going to be gone again because it does not serve me. You know what I mean? It does not serve me. It's just an addiction.
At this stage, it's carnivore all the way for you.
It is. Yeah. Like I said, I like the hardliners. And then that's because that works best for me. And I do not miss vegetables, Dave. Honestly, before I started carnivore, the only vegetables or fruit I was ever having was canned green beans and strawberries. And that's it. I'm not ever, if I had a salad, I wasn't having salad to have the salad. I was having salad to have the blue cheese dressing on top and the croutons. You know what I mean? Back in the day, it wasn't for the veg. So yeah, I've never been a big veggie eater. I do not miss it at all. Nope.
So, if you had a friend wanted to try carnivore, would you recommend they jump in, go cold turkey, or transition in slowly?
I do not know because I'm not a coach. I will say that I was following a low carb diet without sugar or flour for a long time before I went to carnivore. So I had no issues with transitioning at all. But that's not going to be the same for everybody. What I would also like to say is that I would love to find a community up here somewhere because yeah, it's kind of lonely. There is nobody up here. Even there's a lot of ranchers and farms and cows and all that stuff. There's nobody that I have found that follows a carnivore lifestyle. And they look at me weird when I say, yeah, no, I don't eat cake. What are you talking about? And they're bringing, there's a guy that comes to the gym. He works out of the gym and he brings donuts. It's like, dude, he's like, Claudia, do you want a donut? I'm like, do I look like I eat donuts? So mean. But anyway, I said, thank you anyway, but no donuts. So yeah, it would be really nice if I could find a carnivore community up here. So if anybody is out there in Chico or Redding and you know of any kind of groups, I would love it because I'm a lonely little carnivore up here in Northern California.
If people want to get in touch with you, Claudia, how can they reach out?
Yeah, I'll give you that email. It's weddingvowcoach@gmail.com. So if somebody wanted to reach out to me, they could get a hold of me there. But January, I'm seriously thinking January is a 1 year, everybody. So just it's a great time to change your life. The energy of the universe is behind you. Just do it. Take that jump.
I'll put your email into the show notes. Claudia, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Sure. Thank you for letting me talk about it so much because, I don't really have anybody. My family is they're accepting of my lifestyle, but nobody gets it. So it's like you can see the changes, but it's hard. It can be a lonely life, Dave.